it's Aurora and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. Hi, I talk about books and writing, and today I'm going to be talking specifically about copywriting because we are nearly at the new year. Maybe you are thinking about making writing more of a professional thing. It is really difficult to know how to get into that exactly. You know, it takes time to be a novelist. You cannot just say, I'm going to do this and in 3 weeks be making money. You know, it takes time to get the idea, to plan it, to write the novel, and then rewrite it about 1,000 times. And there's never even a guarantee then that it's going to make money. However, you can make money as a copywriter. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just talk about what copywriting is. I will talk a little bit about how I got into it, and then the things you will need to actually be a copywriter, and then wrap it up in a neat little bit of a conclusion like I tend to do, and then we all go and have a lovely rest of our day. So, first and foremost, what is copywriting? So, copywriting, specifically in my situation, I was an e-commerce copywriter, so if you go onto a website and you see a product description, it is written by a copywriter, and that was what the bulk of what I used to do was. I did a few other things, so I got to write guides and how-tos and top 10s, all sorts of things. And I even got to write in-house stuff as well, which was actually kind of probably some of the most fun I had. And yeah, it does vary, you know, if you are working in advertising, it's going to be, you know, if you look at a billboard, the writing on that is copy. It varies, but it is essentially just you are writing for a company. So yeah, that is copywriting. Let's have a quick little how I got into it. So how I got into it, I started life as a blogger, you know, and I started blogging in my early 20s, and I gradually took it more seriously as time progressed. Sadly, a few years ago, I realised blogging is kind of going the way of the dinosaur, and I wanted to keep writing for a living. I needed to start doing other things, which is when I started saying, I want to be a novelist. I started doing different jobs, and in the end, I was like, I want to write for a living. This might be the thing I need to do. I did end up in one place that wasn't very strict with what they wanted, but I was writing product copy essentially for a living. And then I moved on to another place which was a lot more professional basically, and it was a much bigger company, and yeah, that was where I sort of started taking my copywriting a lot more seriously and taking my writing a lot more seriously. And you know, I started out as a blogger, and I moved into copy through that because blogging and copy are quite similar in a lot of ways. So for me, that was my natural into doing it. So that said, if you want to actually be a copywriter yourself, there are some things you are going to need. And first and foremost, it is a portfolio. I actually did not have a portfolio when I got my job. I know I was a bit of an outlier with that, because even my boss looked at me and said, wait, I never asked for your portfolio. I said, no, I was quite vague in what I did, so you didn't ask. And he was like, yeah. And he knew what I used to blog about. I used to blog reviewing like adult toys and things like that. So it wasn't really something I felt I could put into a portfolio. That has since changed. I now actually have a portfolio I'm very proud of and that I can use. And it is a, you know, wide variety. I wrote for 2 websites, and I've got stuff that I wrote for the website that they originally took me on for, and for the main website as well. So it was really great. It was really handy to have, because now I've got stuff from 2 different places, technically. And a portfolio will just be examples of your writing to prove that you can do the job. So, you know, if I had blogged about basically anything else, I could have had blog posts that were, you know, guides or, you know, top 10s, things like that I could have put in, and that's basically what my portfolio is made up of now. I've also got a tone of voice style guide in mind. Well, I've got a clip. I've not got the whole thing because it's huge. But that's the kind of thing you want in a portfolio. It's just the best examples of your writing, and ideally from different places, to show you can write in different styles. And when it comes to doing that as well, you know, you do need to be able to write in different styles. And that's where, if you have a fiction writing background, is really helpful. Because if you are writing first person, you are writing first person for, one person, then maybe another. They are two different distinct voices, or they should be. And that's really helpful, because when you write copy, there is a good chance you're going to have to shift your tone of voice occasionally. And I'll get a bit more into what that's all about in a bit when it gets more into skills. But that's what you need for a portfolio, is to have a nice range of different things to show you are flexible with your writing. Anyway, that said, let's get into your skills. So number one is research. So if we had a product come in, we had a 48-hour turnaround to get it onto the website. And we didn't always have that product in our hands. We could be pre-launching. And suddenly you're sat there going, well, I know nothing about this other than maybe one or two specs, maybe a name. So you would have to go online and find it. Not always easy, but you then have to double check that you are getting the right information. And it's difficult, but research, if you are a novelist of any kind, or a short story writer, if you are a fiction writer, even a non-fiction writer, you should be doing research anyway. So this is a skill you should already have in your wheelhouse. And the reality is being a copywriter hones that skill like nothing I have ever known. Because I know being a copywriter and being pushed as a copywriter made me a better fiction writer, even though they are very different skills at the end of the day. Number two, mimicry. This might sound a bit weird, but you have to be able to mimic the way everyone else in the room is writing. Now, I worked in a team of copywriters, and while our bosses could probably look at it and go, oh yeah, they wrote that, and they wrote that, and they wrote that, when you go onto the website, it should not look like it's been written by 3, 4, 5, 6 different people over however many years. It should look like one person is churning it all out, because a well-written website will have what's called a tone of voice. You have to be able to mimic that tone of voice, and you might even need to switch it sometimes. I wrote for 2 different websites that had 2 separate tones of voices, and it's difficult to suddenly take your brain from doing, I do this, and then suddenly go, no, you have to write in a completely different way. You have to be able to do it. Now, don't get me wrong, I found it hard. I did struggle at times. I'm human. We all did. But you do start to get a measure of it, especially if you're doing it regularly. And again, this is a great skill for your fiction writing as well, because if you're writing a first-person novel from different points of view, you need to be able to do that. That was what I had to tell myself. I was already doing it, so I just had to kind of get on with it. Number 3 is adaptability. You really do have to be able to jump between a few jobs sometimes. And then, I don't know a job that doesn't require you to be adaptable. Whether it is switching out your tone of voices, whether it is going from writing one thing to, this has come in and it's top priority, drop everything, do the other thing instead. Or even just, okay, we've got to go through the website and find the old copy and update it. Again, that's something we used to have to do on the regular. It is being able to adapt to change what you're doing. And again, it is a skill that you need to have in the world of work anyway, but I thought it was worth putting in. And number 4, the ability to take criticism, because you are going to be trained. Any good place will train you up and tell you, this is how we're writing, and you don't get to change it, because this is how we've written before you came along, and we can replace you with someone who can do it. And it is frustrating when you think, I've done a really good job here, this is excellent. And then, your editor, your boss turns around and goes, here is everything you need to change. Here is everything wrong with what you've done. It can kind of needle you a bit. Thankfully, I had a good relationship with my boss. He was a lot of fun. And, he gave as good as he got. So it was all fine. I know I was very lucky in that sense. But he still had to sit there and criticize my writing to make me a better writer. And okay, I know it sounds wild to say you need to be good at taking criticism. You do as a writer anyway, because you are going to have in your professional career, if you choose to have one, people telling you what you need to change about a novel, whether it is proofreaders saying, here are all your grammatical errors, or an editor, a line editor, a big picture editor, any kind of editor going, here is everything you need to cut out, here is everything we think you need to put in. It's very easy to get defensive and go, I don't have to change a goddamn thing. Well, actually, sometimes you do. And you do need to learn to take the criticism and not take it personally. And number 5, fast writing. Now, no, maybe my years of NaNoWriMo were a help here, but you do have to be able to write quickly. As I mentioned before, in my old company, we had like a 48-hour turnaround time. When stuff came up onto our web, when we had stuff to come up on our website, we had to get it up as fast as possible because we wanted to be ahead of other companies. And therefore, and it's that skill is great as a copywriter, and it's been great for me as a writer. It's where I realised I probably am not cut out for being an author tuber, because I am very lock in, get as much down as I can in a short space of time. It's not the most exciting to watch, which is why I'm actually going to be moving into just doing reviews as of the new year. Anyway, so you have to be able to write quickly. And I remember having to do God knows how much copy every day, and then being told, oh, okay, drop everything, you need to do a review or like a top 10 guide, and a company's paying for this, so you need to get it out by this date, and that's going to include all of your edits. Get moving fast. So yeah, you do have to be able to write a lot quickly, especially in the busy periods, because all businesses go through busy and quiet periods, and in our busy periods, it was just constant, keep going, keep pushing at this. And number 6, good grammar and spelling. Now, I feel like this should be a given if you are writing for a living. As I already said before though, particularly with copywriting, because you have got a short turnaround time to get stuff out. There isn't I'm going to take it nice and easy and be lackadaisical. You actually have to get it out and get it out quickly. And your boss that is going to be editing your work does not want to have to fix all your spelling and grammar errors. They should be things that you can fix yourself. You are not expected to be perfect, but you should be of a high standard. Obviously, we do use spell checks and things like that. You should also know when they are wrong, because sometimes they are. Again, you're not expected to be perfect, but you should be of a high level. So yeah, and the other thing is that, being in copy, I got the chance to do a lot of really great fun stuff. I got to try new products before they came out in that industry, which was really cool. I worked in an amazing team who I absolutely loved to pieces. We did have a blast. I did actually enjoy going into work. And it's a rare thing to be able to say that. I still talk to people that I worked with in my last copywriting job because, they were a cool bunch. So yeah, the conclusion is though, I know AI is kind of coming for some copy jobs. Some companies are saying, oh, we'd rather just get AI to write it for us. And yeah, that is a sad state of affairs of my industry. The reality is you can see the difference. It's glaring, and AI copy is just bad. And good companies, they want real people. So yeah, I do say don't worry too much about AI. I hate that the reality is some of what I've written is going to be out in the world and training an AI. I really, really hate that, but it's very little I can do. So, and especially since, technically everything I wrote, it legally all belongs to the company. I don't have any intellectual property over what I wrote. And that is a reality of being a copywriter. You don't own anything you write. I spent, between 9 and 5:30 writing for other people to have nothing really to show for it other than, a few bits of my portfolio. But I don't regret it. I think it's a great industry. I think it's so much fun. You get to learn so many weird things that you would otherwise never bother learning about, I got to learn about Ohm's law. I got to go off and do a deep dive into filofaxes, which had me thrilled because I love filofaxes. You know, it's a real wide range of stuff. You know, anything and everything can need copy. So yeah, I highly recommend it. And, you know, if you found this video useful, you know, do give me a like, you know, maybe even subscribe if you're feeling generous. And yeah, maybe even a comment below of if you found this helpful, or if you have any questions about copywriting. I am always more than happy to answer them. And I will see you again next week for a new video. Take care, guys. Bye.